Hi, my name is Kalem, and this is In the Studio. And in the studio with us at the moment for First Nations Television is none other than Mr. Iain Loganathan, who is the NT Electoral Commissioner, to join us today and discuss what's happening for the Northern Territory election that's coming up. We've brought you in today to discuss some of the things, especially for remote communities, as well as COVID-19. And these are major things that a lot of people out there not confused about, but want to know in terms of what will happen with the current climate of Australia and the world, and basically enrolment to vote. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
A lot of people out there in communities are not too sure about what they should be doing.
What every Territorian needs to do, whether you're in a remote area or an urban area, you just need to make sure that you're enrolled for where you're currently living. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can do this online on our website, ntc.nt.gov.au, or we've got enrolment forms at all the local council office. So go to your council office and say, look, I'm not too sure whether I'm on the roll or not. They'll complete a form for you and they'll get that form back to the Electoral Commission.
I see. And for people in communities?
That's the advice for people in communities.
Oh, okay.
Right, you do it online, or you go to your local council office, and they will have the forms, and we've got an arrangement with the councils where they'll assist people who need assistance to complete those forms.
From the last election that occurred, has there been many changes since then in terms of how people can enrol and all that stuff?
Look, there's not so much changes in terms of how people can enrol, but what is new is there's a new savings provision. Before, if you weren't on the roll when the rolls closed, you couldn't vote at the election. That's changed, and it means that if you're entitled to be on the roll, when a voting team comes to your community, make sure you go there, and they will help you complete what's called a provisional vote, and that way you can get on the roll and you can vote, and your vote will be counted.
Some of the information that we have on from the NTEC itself, some of the numbers, which I think are really fascinating, from some surveys that occurred recently, and that's the over 165,000 people, Territorians, are eligible to be on the electoral roll, and of that, 51,000 are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. And so is there a focus on getting the Aboriginal people in there?
Look, absolutely. In terms of the participation of Aboriginal Territorians, we know about 70% of them are on the roll. So there's 25,000 people in the Northern Territory that should be on the electoral roll, and 16,000 of them are Aboriginal Territorians. So once the biosecurity restrictions were lifted, we've had teams travelling out to 90 communities. We've been working with the Department of Local Government and their field teams, and conducting education sessions, as well as assisting people to enrol for the upcoming election.
Which I think is really interesting. Like it says on here, 25% of those identify as Indigenous. People who miss voting, who miss the day, or they forget, or they've got other things going on, what can they do?
I think the important message here is you can vote anywhere. So if you're not on your community on that day, and you're in another community, or you happen to be in town, then you can vote wherever you are. You can vote at any voting centre right throughout the Territory. It's important that voting is compulsory, and everybody votes. So our message to all Territorians, particularly Aboriginal Territorians, is make sure that you vote in the upcoming Territory election.
How do you feel about the idea that 85% of all Territorians are on the electoral roll, that are eligible to be on it?
That means there's a lot of Territorians not on the electoral roll. We know that there's that number equates to 25,000 people not being on the electoral roll. And we know that most of those electors live in remote and rural areas, and 16,000 of them are Aboriginal Territorians. The shape of the Territory politics would be very different if we had those electors enrolled. At the moment, if you can look at the last redistribution, you can see that the Bush seats are really big seats, and they were losing numbers. If we had those electors enrolling, those seats would decrease in size, and potentially you would have more Bush representation in NT Parliament.
How does the percentage actually compare to other states?
In terms of nationally, the figure is 97%.
Really?
Yes,
Wow.
and in the Northern Territory, it's 85%. The Territory makes up 1% of the national enrolment, but we make up 5% of the people missing off the electoral roll.
That's crazy. Let's talk about COVID-19 and how the polling booths as well as the voting areas will be affected. What are the big things that are going to be put in place for people out there concerned about the pandemic going on in the world?
The most important thing for us is to deliver a fair and safe election, and that's what we're focusing on. So you'll notice some differences at voting centres, whether they be out in the community or whether it's in town. And some of those changes are that you will see that you won't be using the same pencil over and over again. Each person will be given their own pencil to be able to vote.
As a memento.
Yeah, well, yes. It'll be like a little Keno pencil.
Yes.
The voting area, the booth. Every time someone votes, there's a plastic sheet there, and there'll be an officer that comes through and wipes that down before the next person votes. So, we certainly will be encouraging people to kind of like social distance.
Because I was going to ask about the lines that are outside. It's usually a few hundred people all pretty stacked close together.
Yeah, look, we've been talking with the Department of Health, and they've said to us, look, in terms of remote voting, the risk is us taking the virus out there because we know that the virus is not out in remote communities. If the community is lining up, that's really not a risk. The risk is for us to make sure that we are taking the proper health and hygiene regulations to stop any potential spread of the virus.
And how about in town though?
In town, what we're encouraging people to do is early vote. So we're opening more early voting centres. We know that there's less queuing at early voting centres, and if we have more people early voting, then there'll be less people at election day voting centres.
When do the early voting centres open?
So the early voting centres start at the 10th of August, and remote voting starts on that same day as well.
Is there anything else you'd like to say while we have you here?
Yeah, look, absolutely. Just look, it's a reminder to all remote Territorians, particularly Aboriginal Territorians, that voting is important, right? Your vote counts and your vote matters. To find out when a voting team is coming to your community, go to our website, ntec.nt.gov.au. Ask your council, ask your health centre, ask the school. We're certainly doing a lot more stuff on social media. We're doing a lot more stuff with Aboriginal media to get that message out, asking people just to make sure, just ask the question over the next few weeks, when is a voting team coming to my community, and make sure that you vote. And if you're not in your community on that day, you can vote at any voting centre. So again, if you're in another community visiting, or you're in town for some reason, early vote there, but just make sure that you vote.
I think that's a good message for everyone out there. It affects your country. It affects your leadership and your futures, basically.
Look, absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And wish you all the best of luck in the upcoming organisation of the election.
Thank you, Kalem.